Many of you would have seen my lathe used in plenty of projects, and although it's not the highest quality item, it is still a great machine and I've really enjoyed it. Anyway, a couple of days ago it developed a bad noise. It was pretty rough and it made the whole lathe vibrate and shake. At first I thought it was the gearbox, but then after isolating the motor by removing the belt, I realised that it was the motor causing the problem. You'd think that a motor would last a bit longer than that, but anyway, I'm going to fix it and at the same time upgrade it with a 3-phase motor. I'll have to do that with a VFD because I only have single phases in the workshop, and this is going to be a big improvement anyway because I'll be able to change speeds on the fly without any belt changes. The first thing I need to do is move it away from the wall to get access to the motor, and even this was no easy task. I put straps through the casting of the bed and made up a cross piece with a couple of bits of angle iron welded to it to prevent it moving sideways. Even with the carriage over to the right to try and balance the weight, the headstock was far too heavy. I did expect this, but as I don't need to move the lathe very far, I thought it may just take enough weight off to work anyway, plan B. I welded together this contraption so I can place the straps on the outside of the bed with enough clearance not to damage anything that runs alongside the bed. I also cut this block of wood to spread the straps at the top of the bed. I'll take it slowly, but I can't see why this shouldn't work. And that did the trick, and I'll keep hold of them if I ever need to move the lathe again. The easiest option would be to swap the motor out for an identical one, but as the lathe only has a 12-month warranty, that would have cost me $440 from the place that I bought the lathe from. Anyway, Gameco Artisan Supply saw my post on Instagram and they offered me a new motor and VFD to get me up and running again. They've helped me out before and they're also amazing supporters of the maker scene, so a big thanks to them for everything they do. There's 4 bolts holding the motor on, 2 at the back and 2 at the front here. The ones at the back, I can see them, but I have no idea how I'm going to get to them. But let's do these ones first. I should be able to do these. To get to the bolts at the back, I think I need to remove the back panel and then they should be accessible. The bearings seem okay, so I'm not quite sure what was wrong with it. Anyway, let's remove the pulley and get to the new motor. I realised it'd be easier to remove the mounting bracket to then bolt the motor to it on the bench. It'll be easier to install the new motor this way as the bolts are easier to get to. Up until now, I've only used the lathe in the 1 belt position, giving me a top speed of 1200 RPM. The lathe is capable of going up to 1800 though, and doing that without a belt change will be awesome. I've decided to swap the VFD with the one off my old belt grinder. They're both quality VFDs, but they're better suited this way around. I won't go into wiring the motor, but it's all straightforward. What wasn't straightforward and what I did off camera was wire up the VFD to all the switches on the lathe. I did this with instructions over the phone off my mate Corin, as this is not my strong point, although I have done it a couple of times now and I'm learning. All of the wires are temporary and that was just to get everything working, so it's time to try it out. First I'll try the forward and reverse switch on the carriage. Next I'll test the emergency stop and I'll do that with the jog. The jog is running in reverse, but I'll fix that later in the VFD settings, and the pump is also wired up even though I never use it. I've wired up an external potentiometer as I'm thinking of making a control panel, and I think that could be handy, but I haven't fully thought that through just yet. Now I need to route the wires through and to the back of the lathe where the VFD will be mounted to the wall. I'm putting labels on everything, so once I reroute the wires, it'll be a simple task of reconnecting them. I don't want the wires to get caught up in the gears, so I decided to wrap them in this heat shrink. I thought it was a good idea, but it took a long time to push those wires all the way through. I probably should have just wrapped it in tape, but I got there in the end and it did do a pretty good job. Those cables are sorted out, so now I can put everything back together. I still have another cable to deal with from the main electrical box at the back of the lathe, and I've also found this shroud that I can put all the cables in to route through the back of the lathe and to the VFD. I've been working on this video on and off for the last couple of months, and somehow in that time I've lost the footage of me putting the lathe back against the wall, so here's the original footage in reverse. Anyway, I'm fixing the VFD to the wall just behind the lathe in a convenient position. It's been out of action for a while, so it's good to get it up and running again. Next, I'll bolt it back down to the floor. I originally used these bolts and they work pretty well, but the holes have loosened up and crumbled away, so they won't do the job anymore. The only way I can re-drill those holes is to move the lathe, and I've decided to try a different method instead of using the engine crane. I was just trying it out and it worked so well, I decided to keep going with it. I reckon I should have probably just done that in the first place, and even if I needed to move it across the other side of the room, I reckon that would only take about 15 minutes as well. I'm thoroughly cleaning the holes because I'm going to use an epoxy product to directly glue studs into the floor. This stuff starts to go off in about 5 minutes, and in 50 minutes it's ready to clamp down. I went for lunch to let it sit. Now I need to try and put it back in position. I'll try this method first with pieces of plywood and the crowbar, and if that doesn't work, I'll have to get the engine crane. It was easy enough to get it up on the plywood, but can I shift it along and over those studs? That's working great, no problems at all, but I'll just double check that they're all lined up and I'll take those last pieces of plywood out. That really did go very well, and it was much easier than I expected. Now that the stand's bolted down, I will have to check the lathe bed for any twist, but I'll do that another day. If you do want to know how to do that, then Blondie Hacks has a great video on how to do it. I'll try and explain why having a 3-phase motor and a VFD on a lathe is such a good thing. As I mentioned earlier, there's 2 belt positions giving 2 sets of different speeds. The problem with that is the motor has to be loosened to be able to put these belts over, and that's a real pain, especially if you want to do something fast and then 5 minutes later you want to do something slow. You'd be backwards and forwards and it's just a pain. I've only ever used the lathe in the second position, and that'll let me get up to 1200. The lathe will go up to 1800 though, but now I can do that without any belt changes. I'll still need to change gears, but a lot less often. So for example, if I put it in C3, that's set at 550 revs per minute, and I could easily go up or below that by about 200, just staying in that one gear. Here in Australia, we run on 50 Hertz, so if I set it at 50 Hertz, any of the speeds on those charts will be accurate or there or thereabout, but then I can go up to 75 Hertz, which obviously increases the speed. To make it easier to know exactly what speeds I'm going, I made this RPM readout, and I did that as a Patreon only video if you want to check that out. And here's a couple of times that I've recently enjoyed that control on the VFD. The first time I was changing drill bits going up in size, and it was super easy to keep changing the speed to match the drill bit. The other time is when parting off, and in fact I've done that a few times, and it's great to be able to control the speed and make it faster as you get towards the centre. Anyway, I reckon converting your lathe to 3-phase is an awesome thing to do. I may do my milling machine next. Hopefully the video is useful to somebody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.